Adeke, can you hear me? Good morning, Prof. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Yes,
Okay,
I can.
sir. Well done. Yes, sir. How's the family? We're happy to have you, sir. Sir? Yes, sir, we're happy to have you.
I'm happy to also hear your voice and also be part of it.
Thank you. Adeke.
Sir?
Yes, Mr. Karim, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can start now. Yes, we can start.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the 4th edition of the African Youth Peace Summit, having our main theme is towards sustainable peace in Africa, understanding and addressing the root causes of conflict. We shall be having presentations from 6 presenters, experts from different parts of Africa in various fields, including social development, economic and financial crisis, and crimes. At this juncture, my name is Adeke Merijoy, the media manager of FIS, and I will be your host for today's session together with Mr. Shah. I'd like to invite the President of FIS to kickstart this summit. Mr. President, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Adeke. Our chief guest, Mr. Mustafa S. Kata, the learned senior advocate of Nigeria, Professor Amdaka Nike, who also doubles as the Dean, Faculty of Law, Kwara State University in West Africa, Nigeria. The Deputy Chief State Advocate in charge of Taxation and Financial Crimes Department in Lusaka, Zambia, Mrs. Monica Mwanza. The Prosecutor and Superintendent of Police, a legal officer with Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in Nigeria, Mrs. Stephanie Uzo Riebe, a Law Done Associate Consultant and Retired Judge Advocate with Uganda People's Defense Forces, that's Mr. Sam Ugwal, our Board of Directors, starting from Director Logistics and Operation, Mr. Swale Emedwengo, our Director of Finance and Mobilization, Dr. Mrs. Folukemi Ridare, our Director of Admin, Mr. John Ayobami Akinwumi, our Country Coordinator, the Regional Coordinator for Tanzania, Kenya, and Rwanda, Mr. Patrick Mamamamo, the Country Coordinator for Zambia, Ms. Chitinda Marvelous, the Country Coordinator for South Sudan, Mr. Daniel, for Ethiopia, Mr. Enoch, for Nigeria, Mr. Shafi, our partner university, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology in Kenya, invited judges, participating universities, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Permit me to present to you a continent that we have invited experts to talk about, and that is Africa, the continent of Africa. So I present to you this continent that has a population of over 1 billion people, divided into 54 countries, 54 head of states, and each head of state is assisted by ministers, ambassadors, professors, scientists, educationists, teachers, and religious leaders, among others. But this continent has chosen a specialized method of resolving disputes, conflicts, and disagreements, which is by killing one another, destroying innocent lives and properties, our natural resources, our collective heritage, and by extension, we destroy with impunity achievements we've labored for years to accomplish. This is a continent where we trade our natural resources for weapons to fight our own brothers and sisters. We killed and maimed our loved ones because of disagreements we barely understand. The question is, what happens to our traditional justice system and our understanding of brotherhood? What happens to being our brother's keepers? And sadly, the event we're going to be discussing today is not an isolated one. It cut across the entire continent of Africa, from Democratic Republic of Congo to Cameroon, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Central African Republic, Mozambique, Mali, South Sudan, Tunisia, Somalia, Burundi, Uganda, Rwanda, Libya, Chad, Guinea, Zimbabwe, Burkina Faso, and the most recent and current one, Sudan. As we pretend as a continent to practice democracy, since 2020, there have been successful military coups in Burkina Faso twice, in Chad, in Guinea, in Mali, in Sudan, and there have been failed or attempted coup in Central African Republic, in Djibouti, in Guinea-Bissau, in Madagascar, in Niger, and the rest. Experts have classified this conflict as political. Some classified it as civil unrest, identity, resource-based, and some classified it as terrorism. But notwithstanding these classifications, it is our genuine belief as an organization that this conflict and disagreement can be maturely managed without the need to kill one another or destroy our precious collective heritage. Therefore, the theme of this year's summit, which is towards sustainable peace in Africa, and understanding and addressing the root cause of conflicts, was carefully chosen by the board against the above background, and to genuinely interrogate via different presentations that we're going to be having today by scholars of repute, how we can, as a continent, create sustainable peace in Africa. We need a continent free from violence, hatred, senseless killings, and destruction of properties. We need a continent full of growth, economic development, world-class infrastructures, a continent well respected for its productivity and positive contribution to the global GDP. A continent whose people will be respected by the international communities for their extraordinary talent, skills, and ability to positively contribute and shape the world. We need a corrupt-free continent where merit is promoted, respect for civil liberty is at forefront, protection of lives and properties is guaranteed, rights of women and girls to quality education is promoted, a continent where basic social amenities can be freely accessed by citizens, a continent where scholars receive better treatment and have no need to migrate for greener pasture outside Africa. These are many more the reasons why we have assembled a team of experts to assist us in dissecting the challenges we are facing in Africa as far as conflict management and resolution is concerned. So it is against this background that we expect from our presenters far-reaching recommendations on how to have sustainable peace in Africa. It is our belief that if this aim is achieved, not only will credible investors will be willing to invest in our continent, but we shall have a continent all of us will be proud of. I therefore encourage all the participating universities, especially the youth among us, to pay rapt attention to all the presenters and their presentations, because you are the leaders of tomorrow. And if you find yourself in leadership position, which you will in your respective countries, then you will know what to do. Or if you have the opportunity to advise leaders, you will know the kind of advice to give them. Finally, I want to appreciate our partner university, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology in Nairobi, Kenya, for being part of this. And I want to appreciate all the presenters, invited guests, for taking time to be part of this to assist the continent to be better. Ladies and gentlemen, I hereby, on behalf of the Board of Directors, vice, declare the 4th edition of African Youth Peace Summit opened, and I wish you all a fruitful deliberations, discussions, and intellectual engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At this juncture, I would like to invite Mr. Shafi to invite our guest speaker. Mr. Shafi, our chief guest speaker. I think they're undergoing technical issues. So I will.
Okay, it appears Mr. Shafi is not there. Can I introduce the guest speaker?
Yes, please. Please introduce the chief guest speaker.
Okay. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and honor to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Mustapha Sundifukata, who is a social development expert and a consultant for the past 10 years in Sierra Leone. His works has focused on women and youth empowerment, community mobilization, and promotion of inclusive participation in public resource governance. Mr. Mustapha has experience in delivering right-based development programs to foster local economic development through sustainable livelihoods, skills development, and peaceful coexistence. He has led national advocacy and policy reforms programs on inclusive natural resource governance and land rights. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Mustapha from Sierra Leone. Mr. Mustapha, we can hear you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mustapha.
Yes. Do you hear me?
The mic is on, but we can't hear you. Adeke, is it the same from your end?
I can hear him, but he's a little low, very low actually. Like there's a point I had him, then he went off.
Okay.
Hello. Please let anyone let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now.
So right. So without wasting much time, thank you very much for the organizers, Fizz, for inviting me to give an address here on this occasion. Well, as I'm already introduced, I'm Mustafa Kata and I'm from Sierra Leone. And I'm supposed to speak on sustainable peace and its root causes, addressing its root causes in Africa. Well, as you all know, Africa, of course, is a very large and very diverse continent in terms of its nationhood, in terms of its culture, ethnicity, tribe, race, religion, and its natural heritage. Of course, the continent bears a very huge population, which is about 1.3 billion people, which is also similar to the population size of India. But at the same time, our continent is 3 times bigger than India. Why am I giving this analogy between Africa and India? Because we have seen India has been, one of the models of development, where they have diversity in culture and ethnic groups and races, but at the same time, they have been able to maintain certain level of peace. So we also look forward that this diversity and size of our continent in Africa is a strength towards sustainable development and peace that each of our countries, should benefit from. But over the decades, we have seen that the African continent has been overshadowed by several conflicts. And these conflicts over the past decades have eroded and limited development opportunities and peaceful coexistence. So with this background, with this background, we could see that, the trends in conflicts in Africa are rising, especially exacerbating the existing effects of poverty, food crises, climate change, the slow development within our continent. In 2020 alone, we have recorded about 25 state-based conflicts, which are ongoing in 12 countries currently. And in these conflicts, we have seen that it has involved huge losses in terms of investment opportunities, in terms of human lives, in terms of development progress. In these conflicts state-led conflicts, state-based conflicts that are occurring in 12 countries, it has resulted into 19,200, of which we have 4,000 deaths related to IS, Islamic State insurgents. And at the same time also, we have non-state conflicts, which are conflicts between communities, organized groups. In this fashion, there are currently 49 of these non-state conflicts which are going on. and has also resulted in over 3,500 deaths. There are other types of conflicts or violence which are also taking place in the continent. I mean, which is also either state-led or that are being also led by communities or organized groups. These have also resulted in huge amounts of death and disruptions of people's lives and livelihoods. So, I mean, these figures are very huge in terms of, what they represent in the loss of human capital, but also in terms of the loss of, development progress and the peaceful coexistence we are supposed to have in our continent. Also, we have even seen that these figures sometimes, which are associated with higher deaths, these conflicts, but some of them are low profiled, they are not recognized conflicts which are being reported, they are unaccounted for, or some of them don't meet some of the thresholds, to be put into mainstream discussion and resolution or redress mechanisms. So as a result, we are even experiencing very huge volumes of conflicts that are taking place in Africa. And if we consider also civil unrest, these are also huge areas of conflicts which are in the rise, especially in the wake of the COVID epidemic, as well as the recent war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. So we have seen that a lot of economic hardship has led to a lot of uprising, and this has led to several civil unrest and also led to some governments, being really very heavy-handed. So with all of this background, it is, of course, very important to look at some of these root causes of conflict in Africa. As I earlier mentioned, Africa's diversity have not played out well to foster peace and development in the continent and among its people. By focusing on what is happening right now within and among African countries, one can identify that several issues, such as the issues of poor leadership, inadequate investments and reform processes, marginalizations, and non-inclusiveness, intolerances, and infringement of rights are driving conflicts in the African continent. So in terms of what we should be looking at as the root causes of conflict in Africa, I had to put it down this way as one, which is the ineffective state systems and leadership. We have seen that across Africa, institutions exist, but one thing we are challenged with is their effectiveness, as well as its leadership. Be it political leadership, religious leadership, traditional leadership, we have had challenges over the course of the decades. And these have been some of the root causes of conflicts within Africa. This has led to political and power struggles on democratic processes and practices, divisive manipulations, where politicians, and leaders want to stay in power, whether or not they are delivering to the expectations of their people. So we see these things happen. And even where we have weak and biased institutions, these leaders, as long as those institutions serve their interests and purposes, they are not willing to engage in reform processes. Of course, these ones lead to lack of access to justice systems, and it also leads to injustices. So even when people have rights, have clear justifications to demand for their rights, for their social justices, they are denied. So we have seen this huge denial of human rights, denying people their freedom of expression and association. And that has led to, acrimony among diverse groups, creating disunity, ethnic and tribal tensions, regional, religious tensions. So these are all issues we must look at as a root cause of conflict in Africa. The second issue also is the unresponsiveness of our laws and our inactions. Everyone can attest that in Africa, we have huge, outdated, and inhumane laws. Laws that are not fit for purpose, laws that are not serving people, are not serving communities, the interest of communities, the interest of diverse groups, the interest of our diversity, but yet they remain enacted all across Africa. Examples of Sierra Leone, for example, is our land laws. They date back as far as the 1927, and yet those laws are still being interpreted to address current issues, wherein you have large-scale land investments, which are leading to huge conflicts, affecting investment opportunities within the country. So these are all issues. And when it comes to reforms of these laws, our governance institutions are very, very slow to reform these laws. And these make people, citizens of our continent, very impatient and drag them into violent conflicts. We have also seen that interpretation of traditional laws has been a problem, where traditional laws are deemed only by the interest, are interpreted and deemed only by the interest of the traditional leader. Our traditional laws are applied in majority of our rural communities, which Africa is dominated by. And as a result, we are also having injustices perpetrated through these uncodified traditional laws. And we have also seen that there is lack of early conflict warning mechanisms and credible reporting structures and platforms, especially at the subnational and local levels. Conflicts are emanating every now and then in our communities, in our subnational administrative regions. But these have not been identified and addressed simply because we don't have the kind of mechanisms in place. And in most cases where mechanisms exist, there is no credible reporting if it's against the authorities in power. So as a result of that, we see escalations of violent civil unrest that gradually unravels into conflicts. Another root cause I refer to here is poor management and distribution of resources. I know some of my colleagues are going to be talking a lot around these issues. Africa is plagued by poor management, poor distribution of resources. The political elites, the leadership elites want to take control and direct in their own interest. So we have seen huge levels of corruptions and mismanagement within the continent. Nepotism, tribal and regional sentiments has resulted. We have seen that over time, the way and manner in which our natural resources are being managed, there has been lack of access to some of these natural resources by citizens in Africa. Overexploitation has led to scarcity and disputes over these resources. We have seen that there are huge rural and urban disparities where huge state power and presence and resources are centralized in urban areas, whereas rural and peripheral areas have been left with scanty resources. And in most cases, the natural resources they are left to access has also been redistributed by elites who live in urban cities. Another key area as well is the inadequate empowerment. You know, as you may be hearing me, I am not speaking as a political scientist, but I'm speaking as a social development expert. So we see that the inequality among social groups, among political groups, between the young and the old is so pervasive. There is entrenched gender bias, especially against women and girls, you know, where we are still a society that patronizes patriarchy. This leads to huge marginalizations of young people and many other social groups. We are not making adequate investments in the right skills training for our citizens. So as a result, young people are always very frustrated, very disgruntled and frustrated. Partly because they have not had the kind of empowerment that they require to live a productive life. We have seen that across the continent, there is a huge level of unemployment, which is over 60%. When you consider that, it's a huge drawback on our development efforts. And of course, there is lack of access to financial and livelihood resources. People don't have skills, people cannot get jobs, and people cannot access resources, even when they want to start up gainful employment, self-employment. And we have also seen that social and religious tolerance is largely lacking within our continent. We are always boastful of the fact that Africa is diverse. Africa is blessed with so much diversity. But in our diversity in religion, in our diversity in race, in our diversity in age, we have not been able to tolerate each other and support each other. And this has also led to some of the conflicts, violent conflicts within the continent. So, in conclusion, if we have to have sustainable peace in Africa, it is incumbent upon us as young people, as leaders, as religious leaders, traditional leaders, political leaders, academic leaders, development practitioners, to ensure that we promote a new approach of peace building that does not sideline local or indigenous efforts or knowledge in determining the problems and solutions we need to sustain our peace. Therefore, in preventing conflict, it is a priority. We know it's a priority for investment, stability, and development in Africa. And in order for peace to be sustained in the continent of Africa, we must ensure that all actions, all actors, all institutions, and all our processes must esteem the fundamentals of the principles of human rights, human well-being, and to promote the rule of law, promote social cohesion, and we must ensure that we promote inclusive participatory processes that we address our development and conflict issues. So therefore, at this point, it is but very important for us to consider some of these things, that at all stages, we must ensure multi-sectoral planning and increased transparency and accountability in all public service process, delivery processes, whether it be in politics, in our democratic processes, in our social service delivery processes. We must, in our religious beliefs systems, we must promote transparency and accountability. And also we must promote and expand equitable access to effective and impartial mechanisms, redress mechanisms. Platforms, we must create platforms where people must be able to go and talk and share out their differences. We must promote that for all segments of our population, particularly women and young girls and youths as well. We need all of these young people. They constitute huge percentage proportions of our population. And these are the people, especially youths, who are involved in perpetuating these violent conflicts in Africa. Therefore, we must empower and strengthen our local institutions and administrations to play the critical role in ensuring that these services are delivered in an inclusive and effective way. And lastly, as I had mentioned earlier, that we must foster institutional and law reforms to address our emerging issues, especially those we know that can lead to grave consequences in conflicts. We need our laws, our institutions to be reformed. We need them to be responsive. We need them to cater for the demands and needs, as well as the diversity of our continent, so that in maintaining and sustaining our peace in Africa, this will lead to sustainable development. I thank you all. Over to you.
Thank you very much, our chief guest speaker. Really do appreciate you for the intellectual words of wisdom that you have given to us. I hope that all the youth out there, all over the world, I know it's not only African youth who are attending in, and it's not just the youth. The development of Africa starts from an individual. Once an individual is accountable, then we shall have so many others accountable. It goes to a sector, a section, a department, a whole ministry, and then comes to a whole continent. So we're really, really grateful. Introducing our next speaker, Ms. Monica Chapanta. Ms. Monica Chapanta is a Zambian female lawyer with over 15 years of experience and currently practices as the Deputy Chief State Advocate in charge of the Taxation and Financial Crimes Department. She prosecutes and oversees the prosecution of economic and financial crimes, including corruption, in all the courts in Zambia. Academically, Monica attained her LLB degree from the University of Zambia in 2005, then proceeded to do her master's in law in an LLM crime and litigation from the London South Bank University in the United Kingdom. That was in 2008 after her admission to the Zambian bar. She's a trained legislative drafter and possesses a certificate in management and public leadership training from Bridgewater State University in the United States. Counsel Monica is also a Mandela Washington Fellow and an MBA graduate with the University of Zambia. Previously, Counsel Monica headed the Western Province of Zambia in criminal prosecution, where she established presence of the National Prosecution Authority and was the first provincial attorney there. She not only did that, but coordinated and cooperated with other stakeholders in the criminal justice system, ensuring access to justice for all in a corrupt-free environment. She prides herself in leadership with integrity and fair and just prosecution. During her leadership, the province was awarded as the most robust institution in the against corruption in the province. That was in 2018. As director of Taxation and Financial Crimes Department, Counsel Monica passionately vets and supervises the vetting of dockets on corruption for issuance of consent to prosecute. In this vein, she collaborates with the Anti-Corruption Commission of Zambia, Anti-Money Laundering Unit of the Drug Enforcement Commission of Zambia, among others, and the institution's asset forfeiture department to ensure recovery of stolen or proceeds of crime assets. Finally, Ms. Monica also prosecutes corruption cases and also supervises the prosecution of corruption and retained offenses and related offenses in Zambia. Counsel Monica, you're welcome. And I would urge all the upcoming speakers to kindly put on their videos as they address the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that wonderful introduction. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Can you see me?
We just cannot see you. No,
I
we
think
cannot
it's
see
the
you.
network issue. Otherwise, I've switched on my camera.
Okay. For the interest
But
of
I'll
time.
leave it on when the network improves. I'll
Yeah,
proceed.
it
Yes, I'll
will.
leave it on when the network improves. I guess it should show.
Yes, please.
So thank you for the introduction, Mary. I'll go ahead to speak on the impact of political instability and corruption on conflict in Africa. I also want to emphasize that I speak from my point of view as an advocate against corruption and not a political scientist, as well as a lawyer that's fighting corruption and other financial crimes quite passionately. By way of background, of course, as it may be known, we have over 54 sovereign nations or states making up the continent of Africa, representing at least 25% of states globally. Historically, Africa has witnessed more conflicts than any other continent in the world. We could have had a bit of confirmation on this from the chief guest speaker's sentiments, as well as our other keynote address that we had earlier on. It is for this reason that the United Nations Security Council has reportedly spent at least 75% of its time and money resolving conflicts and representing conflict death tolls between 1990 and 2007. So from these statistics and the background, we see that conflicts in Africa, as everywhere, have been in existence for a long time, and they do arise every now and then, though many times not addressed. Most of these conflicts have been characterized by extreme brutality. You will, I want to remind you of this kind of extreme brutality from the genocide in Rwanda, where about 1 million people were massacred in just 100 days, a scale of killings that is unprecedented in the world history. There are a number of wars that have been fought in Africa, some reported, others unreported. And from the above, one can actually infer that most of the conflicts in Africa are based on internal wrangling, with further examples that can be seen from the Ongoni land in Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the genocide case that I talked about in Rwanda, as well as some of the conflict reactions that we saw in Zimbabwe. There are many examples that you can actually point to or look up to, where you see that the cause is usually internal wrangling, struggles, or misunderstandings. Now, moving on, as I look at the impact of political instability and corruption on conflict in Africa, I thought I'd start by looking at what am I referring to when I talk about the conflict with regard to this presentation. Conflicts refer to disputes, disagreements, quarrels, struggles, fights, wars between individuals, groups, and countries. So conflict in this context, it's basically what you understand it to be. But generally, it can refer to a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one. These can be protracted disagreement or arguments that at times could even lead to death of a number of people. It's also been defined as a struggle and clash of interest, opinion, or even principles. Like stated earlier on, we will find conflict in society, or basically just where human beings are. Conflict is inevitable. Reasons or causes of conflict may vary from personal, racial, class, political, or even international. I gave examples of some reasons where we see conflict arising, some examples where we see conflict arising because of some internal reasons, internal being from within that state, within that nation, where there is some disagreement or misunderstandings based on religious beliefs, based on racial separations, or even other reasons that may actually be internal. So with that in mind, I now want to just briefly talk about how I want us to consider political instability in this discussion. Political instability can be defined in many ways, but I want to write on the 3 different approaches that Tamara Smith actually discusses. I'll give my presentation and also these references later on to the organizers of the summit. The first approach that Tamara Smith refers to is that political instability has the propensity for a change of regime or government. The second being that it would, on the incidence of violence or political revolt on a society, such as demonstrations, murders, riots, and so on and so forth. With a third approach of this definition being that political instability would focus on the instability of the policies beyond the instability in the regimes. For example, the degree to which fundamental policies such as property rights are subject to frequent change. So as we look at political instability, let's not just look at politics, but consider the approaches I've talked about. It may even be because there's a change in some fundamental properties relating to property rights, because there are some incidences of violence, which may be as a result of demonstrations, murders, or riots, or other examples that can be given. From this, we see that the political arena usually faces some turbulence, which may result in different reactions. Thus, political instability to a large extent may be deemed to be closely associated with the concept of a failed state, representing volatility in electoral politics. If a government cannot, for example, ensure that it provides basic services to its population, such as security and the possibility of obtaining food and sustenance, or other basic social amenities, it loses the power to apply the law and political instability arises. As a result of that failure of provision of those amenities, we may receive different reactions from the population or the electorate around, bringing about political instability. And of course, this may lead to conflict or civil war in a state. The example being the demonstrations or riots I talked about earlier on, or other reactions bringing about instability. Bearing in mind that some causes of conflict are internal, these can actually be seen in some conflicts experienced by some African countries. You may have heard of examples. Pardon? Hello?
I think it was a miss. An interruption that was not intended. Sorry about that. Whoever has their microphone on, please turn it off. Council, please proceed.
Thank you, Mary. Thus, political instability to a large extent may be deemed to be closely associated with the concept of a failed state, like I stated, and I gave examples on that. I hope by that time I'd not been disturbed. And now I'll proceed. When hit with some political turbulence, some disagreements may arise, and failure to address such may result into conflict. I was very happy when I heard Chief Guest Speaker Mustaf state that conflicts emanate every now and then, but they've not been addressed. So because they're not addressed, we have this political turbulence going on, and sometimes, or many times, this may lead to lives being lost. The socioeconomic development of the state or states may also be negatively affected. When I heard Mustafa, I thought he had actually read part of my presentation, because I could hear that line of talk even from my paper. So I'm glad that we're actually speaking on the same thing as the summit is meant to be. With what I've stated, I believe there's a nexus.
That's why I joined.
There's a nexus between poverty and conflict, as can be seen. Because when we don't have the basic amenities being provided, we have a certain part of society that may suffer, and we may also have the socioeconomic development being affected negatively, resulting in perpetration of poverty. Allow me to move on and look at corruption briefly before I discuss the two on how they impact conflict in Africa. Corruption is a global cancer premised on dishonest and illegal behavior by both the private and public officials. I thought I emphasized, depending on the jurisdiction, either within Africa or globally, corruption can be looked at from a private sector perspective or from the public sector perspective. It can be committed, like in Zambia, by both private individuals as well as public officials. But in some jurisdictions, they focus only on public officials. It is a cancer, indeed, and this has been going on for some time. It's managed differently by different countries. You find in some jurisdictions, the sentence is a death penalty, death by hanging. In some countries, it may just be by a few number of years. While in countries, it may be 10 to 15 years. So we manage it differently. Even in the developed countries, it is there managed differently from the way we would manage it in Africa. Usually with corruption, the perpetrators derive a benefit either directly or indirectly. And in attaining that, I want to agree with Adefaso in the article published in 2018 to say corruption then impairs the integrity, the virtue, or the moral principle, which involves departure from the original or from what is pure and correct. And being at the Summit for the Youth, I want to emphasize that when you have the integrity being impaired or your moral principle being affected, you start seeing all these bad things as something normal. And unfortunately, sometimes it's what happens with corruption, because you find the corrupt individuals start passing on these traits to other officials or other individuals. And with time, it starts looking like it's normal to actually bribe someone so that you can be able to get a favor. It's normal to actually corrupt officials so that you can get the benefit either directly or for the benefit of someone indirectly linked to you. Some examples through which corruption may manifest include improper and unlawful means, such as bribery. I've already given an example of that. Fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of public funds. Interestingly, this can even be through sexual harassment, the inflation of contracts, both public and private, or quasi, to mention but a few. At this point, I want to refer to a certain documentary I watched on TV some time back, emphasizing that this corruption can happen even in private or quasi sectors. The documentary was for a certain sporting association, sport activity association. When electing leaders into those positions of power for the association, from the documentary, I could actually see, and one could decipher that there were some corrupt activities going on to make sure certain people ascended into specific positions of leadership for that association. We're not talking of an association in the government, but just an association to do with a sporting activity involving different participants and voters from the different countries within Africa and some representatives out of Africa. So we see that because someone wants to get to a certain position of power, or because someone wants to get a contract. Corruption, political instability, and development Corruption and political development presents a nexus in that the two negatively affect the social and economic development in Africa. With regards to the importance of the need to fight corruption, allow me to briefly quote what Kofi Annan said when he was United Nations Secretary General in the foreword of UN Convention Against Corruption. That's the where that corruption was a harmful and contagious scourge with a wide range of destructive effects on the global community. He noted that it carries effects that wear away democracy as well as the code of conduct. It opens a way to the contravention of unalienable rights, eats away the standard of life of the people, as well as grants room to organized crime, terrorism, and other contamination to a secure environment for humanity to thrive. You agree with me, these words of Kofi Annan, though given some years back, as live and practical as the effects of corruption today. Because this is what indeed corruption does. It wears away the democracy as a code of conduct. It also eats away the standard of life of the people, as well as grants room to organized crime, terrorism. And these, you will agree with me, would actually be manifestations of the conflict that we see. This may arise because of some corrupt conduct by some few individuals, selfish individuals. Moving on, he also observed that corruption incapacitates the underprivileged excessively as if resources made for national growth diminishes a government's capacity to furnish social amenities, feeding imbalances, and deprivation of justice. It impedes foreign aid and foreign investment. At this point, allow me to give an example of a video that was making rounds from Al Jazeera called The God Mind. For those of you that watch that, you'll see that this video speaks to the observation that Kofi Annan made to what corruption can actually do to a country. This was talking about a certain country within Africa. I don't want to disclose the full facts. I think the case should have been taken on by investigative authorities as someone passionate about prosecuting money laundering cases. This is something that we thought could be on. So from the video, you see a few selfish individuals boasting about how they can go to this African country to get the natural resources by bribing some very senior political leaders in that country. Then they drive out those resources and make more money. And present themselves to the country like foreign investors, but because by political practices, they actually steal the resources that could be used to develop this country, the resources that could be used to basic amenities are provided the citizens of this country. They drive all that out of this African country and start enjoying the benefits that should be attended to a larger population for their own selfish interests. With what I've stated on political instability as well as corruption, you see that when we have corrupt leaders, we may ultimately end up having some instability in the political arena. And when this happens, unfortunately, we have our social and economic development negatively affected. We have failure to provide basic amenities. We have misunderstanding, we have civil wars. We also have struggles by the people to actually trust its leaders in making decisions that will positively affect them. In conclusion, allow me to state that the impact of political instability and corruption in Africa is that it ignites conflict, perpetuates poverty and underdevelopment. You see it undeniably have a lot of natural resources. We have the oils in Nigeria, in Angola, we have other natural minerals in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, just to mention but a few. But then you find even way after, 50 years after independence, we are not as developed as we should be. And this, to some extent, can be attributed to certain selfish individuals, certain corrupt leaders that have not been able to enable these African states to enjoy these resources. Through corruption, resources meant for the provision of public services and economic development are channeled into the hands of a few selfish individuals. And corruption, as corruption is a cancer, this dishonest behavior, like I stated earlier on, if not curtailed, can be transferred to other officials, and sooner or later, the illegality starts appearing normal to a larger population. It becomes the norm to bribe a voter to vote for someone into a position of power, or a public officer, or to bribe a public officer so that one can be awarded a contract or can actually be paid from the public coffers for a service to be provided or not even intended to be provided. We see some of the corrupt practices, especially during voting times. We see a lot of conflict. You may be able to relate that there was conflict or even threatened conflict when voting was going on in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zambia, in Uganda. There are a lot of reports. In Zimbabwe, at a certain point, people fled the country to neighboring countries as a result of political crisis in that country, which crippled the whole country. From these disturbing historical statistics and also present happenings, it's not far-fetched to conclude that Africa is a conflict-ridden, and political instability and corruption play a huge role in this conflict that Africa is ridden by. Therefore, in addressing the root causes of conflict in Africa, we have to go back to the basics, to our roots as Africans, our moral principles, the honest behavior, the consideration of others, and the need to uphold the rule of law at all times. The solution lies in each one of us, in you and I. You can do something within your abilities. You can refuse a bribe. You can report corrupt practices and preach peace during suspected or threatened political instability situations for sustainable peace in Africa. You and I can make a difference. I thank you and happy Africa Liberation Day. I hand over to Mary.
Thank you very much, Council Monica. Happy Africa Liberation Day. And wow, that was a really touching presentation. It is really sad that even after 50 years of independence, we are still, Africa is not to the level that it actually should be. And yet we actually have all the raw materials, the resources that we need. So the problem now comes into the people. We are not doing our jobs. We're not playing our roles, our parts to ensure that our continent is moving forward. But really, thank you, Council Monica, and I hope everyone else out there is listening and is going to be convicted to play their roles. Starts with you. One change becomes a change for us all. To introduce, yes, to introduce our next speaker is going to be Mr. Shafi, my co-host for this session. But before that, I know there are very many people in the audience wondering why we are not taking any questions for our presenters, but I argue, just jot them down, and after the session, we shall give you an opportunity to air out your questions, and the specific presenters will respond to your questions. So Mr. Shafi, over to you.
Yeah. Our next speaker is going to be Professor Amoda Kanike, SAN. He is a professor of law holding the degrees of LLB Hons, LLM Hons, PhD, BL Hons. He's also a professor of law and is current Dean of Faculty of Law, Kwara State University, Malete, Ilorin, and a member of the Governing Council, Kwara State University, Malete. Professor Amoda Abiodun Kanike is a senior advocate of Nigeria, has taught law courses at various institutions, both in Nigeria and abroad. He has about 75 journals articles, 2 books, and 12 chapters contributions in books, and more than 24 papers presented. He is also a member of Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitration, Fellow Institute of Chartered Economics, Fellow Institute of Arts, Management and Professionals, among others. He has been honored with over 12 honors, with the recent one as the most notable and top solicitor of the 21st century, endorsed by the International Chartered World Learned Society, based in the United States of America, on the strength of his contribution to knowledge and the 2 theories he propounded on entrepreneurship and the law between 2019 and 2020. The topic is going to be presenting to us today is the role of identity and ethnic divisions in fueling political conflicts in Africa. Over to you, Professor.
Prof, you need to unmute your microphone, sir.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for the privilege of being invited and to participate in this international conference. Let me just go straight to the point that what I'm discussing is the role of identity and ethnic divisions in fueling political conflicts in Africa. Nigeria will be placed as a case study because of its leadership role. I'm sure everybody's hearing me now. Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
I'm most grateful. First of all, is to introduce us to the topic. The role played by identity and ethnic divisions in fueling political conflicts in Africa, especially in Nigeria, is a very serious one, and definitely everybody requires audience attention, whether we're private individuals or government or non-government organizations. This is not something to overlook. We know that it is a problem and an epidemic, especially when it rears its head in the 2023 general elections, and as we see in various places in Africa. So in other words, we just look at role, the identity, ethnic divisions, fueling of political conflicts, and so on and so forth. These are things that we already know on our own. But at least we should also be able to look at Africa generally. The family, the ethnic, the lineage, the clan, the tribe are the structures through which African society functions traditionally. These we know from historical link or historical heritage, which we are characterized. These has 3 different links, which are cultural, ethnic, and linguistic. The situation can better be described as a people's experience, aspirations, and desire. Once any of the ethnic group is deprived of their culture and affinity, then the people react, and you will see them in unison, thinking that that direction must be adhered to strictly. and that purpose of life should be seen as non-distorted. During colonialism, a lot of us have read history, even if most of them are not in our presence. But during colonialism, there are some ethnic groups that were put together by the colonial power as one, or where others were splitted. Different administrative frameworks were used, and you will see that these also affected part of our identity and ethnic links. No wonder in Africa today, the ethnic conflicts linked with some ethno-religious dimension. Ethnicity has been seen in this format. One, the source of conflict. Two, it is a tool used by political class to promote their self-centered ambitions. This we will see during our further discussions here and all the rest. Because if we look, two positions are both practically speaking. The two format goes hand in hand like the Siamese twins. As far as African continent is concerned generally, ethnicity is a fundamental fuel for those who will fail politically to succeed to be in power by manipulating the political consciousness of the Africans. This cut across several countries, such as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, outlawing parties organized on tribal or ethnic basis because he saw it as a problem. Alfred Boni of Cote d'Ivoire co-opted ethnic groups through ministerial appointment, civil service job, social services, and other opportunities because he also saw it as a problem on the ground. Further ethnocentric behaviors can be seen in the case of Julius Nyerere, who saw tribalism as a cause rather than benefits. He decided to put in place nationalistic pride in order to stop tribalism. He did it in Tanganyika, which later became Tanzania. On the part of Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, he put up an alliance of ethnic groups to team up with his popular Kenya African National Union Party. This was a good move away from ethnicity. South Africa, in the post-apartheid period, the fair share of ethnicity is being felt, notwithstanding that apartheid itself divided the country along racial, ethnicity, and tribal democratic arrangement. What this connotes is that the division still remains today politically, more so as the Zulu nationalists, through its leader, assert themselves ethnocentrically. Now coming straight to the issue of Nigeria as a case study. The real identity called Nigeria was created in 1914, going through historically. And it's a fact that it's a multi-ethnic country with more than 200 ethnic nationalities, coupled together with 250 dialectical or languages. In political reality, however, all the other tribes are subsumed into three major ethnic groups of Hausa Fulani, Yoruba, and Igbo. Furthermore, most of these are also subdivided further into groups. And specifically, the Hausa group alone have not less than 29 different divisions, and the sub-groups are subdivided among the three major groups interacted with each other before colonialism. And up to now, but the artificial boundaries created by the colonial masters fuel the social construction. The artificial boundaries created by the colonial masters fuel the social construction of these ethnic groups in such a way that the creation of free tribes in close relationship to the period of Nigeria under colonialism. The colonialists, in order to successfully administer Nigeria, created what is known as Northern Region, Western Region, and Eastern Region. Both of the Western Region and Eastern Region in 1906 were combined to form what was known as Southern Nigeria. I would not want to bother you much of this historical, but it has a link with what we find today. And Nigeria gained independence in 1960. There was a 1960 independent constitution, goes on 1963 Republican constitution, and so on and so forth. There were also the ethno-religious polarization, which increased because the Christian South were afraid of the dominance by the more populated and Muslim North. And at the same time, the poor country of the North the poor economy of the North also created fear in comparison to the educated Southerners in Nigeria. Hence the struggle through region and ethnicity among the regions in Nigeria. And this goes on and on and on, not to waste time. Now, the points in the outcome of the 2023 general election is the fact that the 2023 general election has been seen and concluded, won by Southerner, especially West Southern, in person of Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu, who will be sworn in as president 29th of May 2023 as Nigerian president. The points in the outcome of the 2023 general elections are thus: 1, to avoid dominance of one ethnic group against the other, the APC, Labour Party, and some other parties decided to go by zoning arrangement. That it is the turn of the Southern candidate to be president. The PDP did not follow this arrangement. 2, to avoid the dominance of one religion against the other, the president and vice president ought not to come from the particular religious faith. The APC could not do this because of the fear of losing votes from the North. Sentimentally, the PDP, Labour, and some other parties were able to meet up. 3, from the result of the election, one can see ethnic divisions in the voting pattern, except for some few states, although some result shows other factors influence the outcome. 4, religion was used to campaign, and some votes were casted significantly on the basis of religion rather than competence. It was seen by some Nigerians across the region as a religious war rather than a general election. 5, there were alignment and realignment of groups in the group of identity to show strength, annoyance, aggrievedness, show off for recognition, rather than party affiliation nor regional ethnic affiliations. 6, there was significant less government interference with the outcome of the election in comparison with other elections. 7, there was significant level of insecurity and threat against voters in terms of ethnic affinity and retaliation or counter-retaliation. And 8, even the arrangement of sharing positions, especially that of National Assembly, with other ethnic coloration has started. This is a clear testimony. We've been seeing it on television and newspapers and so on and so forth. And already causing political unrest or threat to democracy. How much more when it comes to the issue of ministerial appointments? These I have highlighted based on what we have seen in the 2023 general election. Now going to the issue of causes of identity of the ethnic divisions in Africa, especially in Nigeria. Fundamentally, we listed them, I explained them, but I will not take much of your time. 1 is historical antecedent, based on what I have said earlier. 2, lack of morality. 3, lack of proper education. And 4, lack of statesmanship. And 5, constitutional provisions and laws for political parties. They all participated in marring what we have. Then 6, lack of development. 7, concentration of opportunities with political class stroke leaders. Then 8, non-inclusion of recognition of several ethnic groups in leadership positions. And 9, foreign interest and support for conflicts. 10, the UN ICC lack of adequate power and hypocrisy of the world powers. And then we have 11, which is religion. And on and on. Let me just say that the historical antecedent I have already highlighted, because historically we are separate groups. And because it has grown as an institution, which people are used to, it has become difficult to jettison it for greater unity of the country. Then we have lack of proper education. So people are not well educated to even understand what is ethnicity, what is group identity, what is their notions for unity and so on and so forth. That educationally, even those who are educated may not even appreciate what we are talking about. Then you have lack of statesmanship. Statesmanship politically is defined as possessing the quality of being a statesman. It is further defined as an experienced politician, especially one who is respected for making good judgments, and on and on. But do we have that one in Africa? I believe not enough or not properly. done as much as we have wanted. Then constitutional provisions for political parties. Most of the African countries, including Nigeria, used to insert in their constitution that there shall be no discrimination. Is that true? Is that really being used, particularly from what we have seen? Whatsoever is against this discrimination would be punished. That's the way they frame the Constitution. But from the above, it seems the Constitution is aware of the role ethnicity will play. So it decided to protect it, not to be infringed upon or used at all by the people to deprive them of their rights. In Nigeria, we even have the Federal Character Commission Law, which is saying that we should avoid ethnic dominance of one group against the other. Now we have lack of development. If you don't develop a particular place, the agitation will be much. And the agitation will be, let my people be in government. If they're in government, they will be able to develop our own place rather than looking for others to come and develop it. So everybody now put themselves in groups or identify with groups, which has also caused political tension. Then we have concentration of opportunities for political leaders. And these are also highlighted. The non-inclusion of recognition of several ethnic groups in leadership positions. This has also been part of why there's political tensions and crisis continuously. And then I cited an example where you even have the Ohaneze Ndigbo group, Afenifere Yoruba group, Arewa Consultative Forum, Hausa Fulani group, all struggling from one identity or the other. And these influence our political tension. The other groups also, which includes even the militia group with different ethnic coloration. And this has affected us politically. Foreign interests. There are some countries, let's say the truth, who on their own will even want to dictate which kind of leaders we should have. And a lot of them, just like some of the former speakers have said, will not even want Africa to be in unity. And so because of their own interests, they want us to be where we are. I've done all this and all the rest. And then I've also talked about the role of religion plays an important role in Africa and Nigeria political affairs in such a way that voters in the country are divided along religious lines, especially in Nigeria. This became more pronounced in 2023 general election, and some of the political parties were seen as more Christian friendly, while some are seen as more Muslim friendly. The APC had to struggle throughout the election to convince the electorate about their decision to run a Muslim ticket. Even during NRC and SDP election in Nigeria, which almost threw the country into another civil war, took the understanding of Nigerians, especially the personality of Bashorun, MQ Abiola, to convince the delegates or electorate as to the reason why the Muslim ticket of Babagana Kingibe and himself should be trusted. He got vote from both the Christian and Muslim voters generally, even though the election was eventually annulled. I have done a summary of this and make conclusions, but most especially, in order to be able to appreciate this paper, I have made adequate recommendations, and the recommendations goes as follows. One, there should be seminars, symposiums, conferences, such as this one well organized. Such as this one well organized, I repeat it, which would disabuse the minds of most Africans, especially Nigerians, from placing too much an emphasis on identity and brothers and sisters in order to achieve peace. Two is to work. That's doing good for your neighbor is the ultimate of high moral standard. Three, there should be proper education and proper understanding of the people from primary, secondary schools, and tertiary education, including vocational centers and general public, about the negative side and effect of address an urgent necessity to poor. Four, the populace should inculcate more characteristics of statesmanship and not ethnic or parochial mind. The larger interest in Nigeria. Most of the African countries should amend their constitution by specifically inserting in a provision in the constitution that every given election year, the presidency, the vice presidency, governorship, and deputy governorship position should rotate among the geopolitical zones in such a way that no political party can or shall have the power. Two zones constitutional arrangement should be a constitutional issue. Then we have 6. There should be even development government cutting across ethnic groups and geopolitical zones in such a way that no geopolitical zones or ethnic groups will be much more interested to play ethnic politics. Most ethnic politics are played by the people because of the belief that except a member of their ethnic group or who have the same identity with them are in political power, they will never have the opportunity to develop. Then 7, the salary structures, benefits, and opportunity accruing to political leader should be fine-tuned in such a way that a teacher should be paid much more higher than political leaders. This arrangement will keep only those who are ready to serve in the government, and they will stop or reduce the use of ethnic and identity to cause political instability. Then 8, the various ethnic groups in any African country in terms of political arrangements through power should be considered. This will bring a sense of inclusiveness. The identity and ethnic divisions in Africa, especially Nigeria, will reduce. 9, there should be enough awareness to the African countries, especially Nigeria, to avoid foreign countries who try to support one group of persons against the others or ethnic group against the others. We should know that no foreigners will love us more than we love ourselves. Our disputes and disagreements should be resolved by ourselves. Then 10, the court, United Nations, on the issue of anyone playing identity and ethnic divisions for political gains. Such a person should be prosecuted, while the law in relation to this should be strengthened. And finally, the use of religion to score political gains in Africa should stop and be discouraged, most especially in Nigeria. Even though it may be hard to accept by some persons, politics should be separated from religion, and Nigerians can do it if we intensify our efforts. The same, the Africans can do it. Thank you for these opportunities. I'm most grateful.
Thank you very much, Professor. We do appreciate you for that passionate presentation. We're really grateful to have you and to have had an opportunity to hear from you. Yes, as you well said, no one can love us more than we do love ourselves. So we Africans have a great role to play, to love ourselves, love our countries, love our continent first, in order for it to become the better place that we dream of. To introduce our next speaker, I'll invite the President, Mr. Abdulkarim Aziz, to invite the next speaker. Mr. President.
Thank you so much, the moderator. Professor Amdaka Nike, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, for the passion and the commitment to ensure that Africa as a continent becomes a better place for us. As you were making your presentation, one of the few Pan-Africanists we have around joined the meeting. He told me he had another engagement that is in the person of Professor Pierlo Lumumba. We all know him, especially for the students. they know who Professor Pierlo Lumumba is.
Yes.
And so he has excused himself for a bit. He's going to join us. So I don't want to do the introduction why he's not with us. He joined, and that was when Prof was presenting. And so he said he's going to join us back. So I will wait for that. Perhaps we can take few questions pending the time we will wait for him, and then we take the next presentation. Adeke.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As we wait for our next speaker to join in, we can take a few questions. I'll request the people in the audience just to raise up your hand, and then I'll pick you and you can ask a question to any of the previous floor speakers.
Adeke, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we also supposed to have presentation from Mrs. Stephanie, and she just communicated that she's back from the court and she's available now. Perhaps we should take her presentation now.
Okay, that is great. I thought you were still in court. Then I will request Mr. Shafi to introduce Councillor Stephanie. Mr. Shafi, over to you. Okay, not to waste a lot of time, I will introduce Councillor Stephanie. Councillor Stephanie is a lawyer and a prosecutor. She attended Igbidion University, Okada, where she graduated with an LLB degree. She proceeded to Nigeria Law School, Buari campus, where she was called to the bar as the lawyer and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. She has an LLM and an MBA from Gloucestershire University in England. She's a member of Arbitrators Club that's in the United Kingdom. She has a level 7 postgraduate degree on strategic management and leadership from OTHM that's in the United Kingdom. And she is a legal officer with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, a superintendent of the police. We are so humbled to have you. Councillor Stephanie, the floor is yours. Kindly put on your video if that's okay.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm so sorry for actually, I just got to the office from court, trying to put on my laptop.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mary, for the introduction. And to my learned sake, good afternoon, good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm unable to put on my camera because I'm using my phone. I'm just getting to the office and I've not turned on my laptop. But let me continue so that I don't waste the time of
We're hearing you.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the role of natural resources in causing and sustaining conflict in Africa. I went further to doing my research, what are natural resources? And I came up with biological, mineral resources, aesthetic assets, which are mostly afforded by nature without human intervention. So all these include economic or material, which are economic or immaterial resources. And examples of such assets include forest, surface water, and groundwater, and the fertile lands of the soil and minerals within the country. So the practice of natural resources considers the way in which societies manage the supply of or access to natural resources upon which they rely for their survival and development. So in Africa, which is the major focus right now, is that we are blessed with natural resources. God bless us naturally with natural resources, and part of these are what we live on. So let's go, for example, energy resources such as petroleum, natural gas, and heated water. These are all geothermal energy, which are contained within the layers of the earth. And this has been, example like Nigeria, these natural resources has been one of our greatest assets, which we are being embedded on, which we are still embedded on. I used two countries during my research as example, which was Nigeria and Rwanda. Nigeria and Rwanda, these were the two major countries which I termed my research on. So I went further to discuss how do natural resources cause and sustain conflict in Africa. Natural resources conflicts are disputes over the access, use, and control of the land's natural resources. The extraction of these resources is often cited as one of the most critical challenges facing developing nations today, due to being a key factor in triggering, escalating, or sustaining violent conflict across the globe. In 2018, a study from the United Nations concluded that more than 40% of internal armed conflicts over the last 60 years have been linked to natural resources. Violence and conflict can occur in countries where natural resources are scarce, as well as in regions where there is an abundance. In most cases, it is mitigated through the use of legal agreements, financial deals, and peace treaties. However, natural resources conflicts and disagreements are weak, or if the political systems of the country are fragile or corrupt. Now, what are the major causes of this conflict in Africa? Biologists have argued that competition over scarce natural resources is one of the key drivers of violent conflict that causes conflict within natural resources in Africa. Chilling examples of conflict are in some parts of the country in Africa, which includes Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Sudan, and other rich resources regions of Africa, including Nigeria as well. This somewhat visualizes the narrative whereby an oil-producing country is seen in Nigeria, protecting its community from oil thieves, known as bunkers. Also, we have rebels in Angola, who is seen to be guarding diamond mines from thieves who wants to steal from their mines, and they want to protect this by all means, and thereby forming rebel groups, yet establishing causality, which has remained elusively largely due to the obvious limitations associated with cross-country studies and the lack of usefulness for data, for Africa's data. Now, based on these examples which I've cited, for example, in Angola and some other African countries who are known to produce gold mines and diamond mines, because they get creative financial opportunities to rebel leaders. These rebel leaders in turn build and sustain rebel organizations, which would encourage armed conflict. So because of these natural resources already found in these countries, and they feel they are trying to protect these resources from outsiders, not to steal from it. But in same vein, they are creating organization, building organization for rebels. Would I call them armed rebels or banditry, and thereby causing conflict, causing chaos, fighting, and what have you within the country. I'll give an example, Nigeria, which is my country, because I'm conversant with it. When you go to the Niger Delta regions, you see conflicts from, they call them militants. This group of militants are indigenous of the land where oil is being produced. And they use this means where oil is being produced. They use this same means in trying to secure the oil from oil thefts. But this same group of militants who are trying to secure the oil theft drives investors, real investors who are coming to invest in the community and assist in modernizing or upgrading the community. They turn into rebel. They are rebellious against them, fight them, drive them, and even the natural resources, they use it for their own use, thereby stealing it and even becoming the bunkers other than people outside. So I spoke further on sustaining. How do we sustain these natural resources, which we are being blessed with in Africa how do we sustain it to avoid conflict within ourselves? So I went further to talk about Cadlow's New War Theory, which helps to explain and distinguish two categories of conflicts by pointing out the salient feature in each. However, what we cannot categorize in the effect that is within conflict, which has previously been, which has become the ordeal within the country. I went further to expatiate more on peace, having a peace resolution between both, peace resolution to sustain conflict in Africa between each countries. And I went on to talk about the United Nations and the African Union, who has made efforts toward peace, building peace capacity, and ensuring that peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building has come into form as a guide in mitigating this war of conflict due to our natural resources. At this point, I will be stopping here, but I've sent my presentation. I'm just going off head on what I have practiced already, because I've not been able to get to my office to open up my computer. I'm talking from the car. So on this note, I'll be stopping here, and hopefully my paper, which I've presented, will be shared to the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Council. It is really of great commitment that you have taken time off, even if there was no immediate availability of what you had planned for us. But by the fact that you are the one who prepared it, you had everything in mind, and you have been able to share with us what you had, and we are so grateful for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm not sure if our next speaker is in the house, Mr. Abdulkarim. Do we have Professor in the house? Okay, I think they're still organizing for the next speaker to join us. However, there is a question. I'll read out some of the questions and we have them answered by the specific presenters addressed to, so that we don't waste any more time. This question is directed to Professor Amuda. Some people are of the view that the swearing will not take place. What is your take on the situation?
Well, do I go on to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. My take on the situation is that the swearing ceremony, definitely by law and by the precedents we already have so far in relation to what has happened in Nigeria, should and will take place. Because though the case is in court, but that does not stop the swearing in of the elected president. Constitutionally, it is allowed, and by order of precedent that has happened, the president should be sworn in, regardless of the fact that the cases or the petitions are still in court. That will be decided in court, but that will not allow the place of constitutional problem, because we may box ourselves into constitutional problem where there's no president sworn. So in the larger interest of the country, the swearing in should take place. And constitutionally and by law, the swearing in should take place.
Thank you very much, Professor Muda. I hope the viewer who asked this question has got the answer. We await the determination of the court to give us. The next question is directed to Council Monica. Zambia is the 116th least corrupt nation out of 180 countries, according to the 2022 statistics on corruption. Do you think the government of Zambia is doing enough in fighting corruption?
Thank you for that question, Mary. It's a pity, yes, our corruption index barometer shows that. I can confidently say that with the new government that we have, there are a lot of efforts being put in place. We have arrests for who are also in authority, like in a different is for whether someone is in government or not.
Council, your network is breaking.
All right, Adeke, as we, Professor has just joined us, Professor PLO Lumumba.
Okay.
This question till after his presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to introduce to you Professor PLO Lumumba. Professor Lumumba is a lawyer and a Pan-Africanist. He was named after an African hero of that time, Patrice Emery Lumumba. Professor is an advocate of the High Courts of Kenya and Tanzania. He is a partner at MLs Lumumba and Lumumba Advocates, and he is and has lectured at the United States International University, Nairobi, the University of Nairobi, Widener University, United States of America, Nairobi Summer Programs, as well as a part-time lecturer with a number of universities and colleges. Professor Lumumba served as the secretary to the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, and in October 2001, he was appointed by the Honorable Attorney General of Kenya to serve in the capacity Hello, members, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so he served as the secretary to the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, and in 2001, he was appointed by the Attorney General of Kenya to serve in the National Committee on the Implementation of International Humanitarian Law, and also once served as the director of the Kenya School of Law. Professor is one of the trustees and the executive director of the African Institute of Leaders and Leadership, Nairobi, Kenya. Professor academically received his LLB and LLM degrees in law from the prestigious University of Nairobi, which was followed by a PhD with specialization in the law of the sea at the University of Ghent in Belgium. Professor Pierlo Lumumba has attended several merit trainings, including a Commonwealth Young Lawyers Court at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, University of London, International Committee of the Red Cross for University Teachers in Geneva, Switzerland on humanitarian law, the International Visitors Program in the United States of America, among others. Professor was the Secretary of the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission and former Director of the defunct Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, now Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Professor Lumumba was a student leader in his days and has also served in the Law Society of Kenya and has received recognition by the Law Society of Kenya and the International Commission of Jurists, Kenya chapter, as a member in good standing. Professor Lumumba is a renowned legal practitioner recognized by peers as a leading litigator in constitutional law and judicial review cases. He has also been recognized by the Kenya United States of America Society as a leader in the mold of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., with several thousand speeches on diverse subjects delivered in and outside Kenya. Professor Lumumba is recognized as one of the leading public speakers in Kenya and by extension in Africa. His selected speeches will be released in book form under the title Pierlo Lumumba. And Professor is also the founder of several organizations, including the Pierlo Lumumba Foundation, a charitable organization that has been in operation since 1990. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome me. Please join me to welcome Professor Pierlo Lumumba. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me start by congratulating you for putting up this particular virtual meeting on the occasion of the commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Organization of African Unity, now the African Union. It gladdens my heart that young Africans are now beginning to realize that if the continent is to realize our potential, then they must participate in her activities. Over 60 years ago, 32 heads of states assembled in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, giving birth to the Organization of African Unity. That organization then transitioned and is now known as the African Union. The whole idea behind the founding of that body was to ensure that post-colonial Africa immunize ourselves from the neo-colonial activities of the former colonial powers. Several years down the line, Africa has had her trials and tribulations. Those tribulations have been in the area of politics. Africa has been the home to coups and counter-coups, and they have seen death. Africa has been the home, if you may, of genocides, as we saw in Rwanda. Africa has seen conflicts, and indeed, as I speak to you now, is seeing conflicts in the Cameroons, in the Sahel, in Sudan, in Tigray, and in different parts of the continent of Africa. Africa is not at ease in Eastern Congo, in Northern Mozambique, with the consequence that our young men and women do not have the opportunity to serve her as they should. The question that then we are posing today, what is it beyond lamentation that we can and must do? And my charge to you today is that we have lamented for too long, we have complained for too long, we have analyzed for too long, and the time is now to ask ourselves what it is that we can and must do in order to ensure that the African political environment is purged of leaders whose greed is insatiable, that the African economic arena is purged of pariahs whose only claim to fame is that they take from Africa and do not give from her. That Africa must embrace and re-embrace cultural renaissance so that we begin to have faith in things that we produce as Africa. That Africa is no longer a home of things that are made outside of the continent, that Africa must be able to earn the dividends of the fourth and the fifth industrial revolution, that Africa should be a hub for manufacturing, that Africa should be a home where young men and women are prepared to serve as teachers, as lawyers, as doctors, as engineers, as historians, as geographers, as anthropologists, as archaeologists, so that they are able to feed themselves, so that we do not have young Africans running away to the Arab world, young Africans running away to the United States, young Africans dying in the Sahara Desert and in the Mediterranean Sea as they go seeking opportunities which only lead to their treatment as latter-day slaves. And I believe that it can be done, particularly if there is resolve amongst you young people. And your resolve can only be given energy if you are coordinated. And your coordination must not only be virtually, it must not only be through Instagram and through Twitter and through all these media, like our forefathers did in the 1950s, 1970s. All forces of goodwill amongst you young people must now begin to coalesce in a manner that will create a powerful force, a force that will send a clear message to the African politicians who have messed the continent up, that the time is up, that the time is up, that they can no longer manipulate us, that the time is up, that they can no longer steal for us, that the time is up, that they can no longer treat us as children of a lesser God, that the time is up, that they cannot manipulate us by playing on the tribal card, that the time is up, that they can no longer manipulate us by playing on our religion, that the time is up for them not to confuse us, and that the time is now for us to come together and ensure that we can solve our problems. It pains me to no end when there is conflicts in Sudan, and those who are resolving it in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, and those who are midwifing the process are the United States of America and Saudi Arabia. Can't we not do it ourselves? Don't we have African institutions? Don't we have African men and women with the capacity to midwife these processes? So today, without belaboring the issue, I'm telling you, make a resolution today that out of this engagement, there shall emerge a pan-African movement whose only agenda shall be to liberate us economically, politically, technologically, culturally, and otherwise. I wish you a successful Africa Day. God bless.
Thank you so much, Professor Pielo Lumumba. We appreciate those wonderful words of wisdom. Professor Lumumba is one of the few Pan-Africanists that we have around. He's someone that most of us are looking, forward to be like. We want to follow his trend by ensuring that African solutions are used to address African challenges. Africans are involved in their own, decision-making. Africans are respected worldwide based on merit. Africans also contribute to the global GDP in terms of performance. So like he said, rhetorics are not alone, and that's why we're having this summit, this youth summit, so that how can we proceed going forward? So Prof, we thank you so much for your time. I know I dragged you from a meeting, and so we appreciate your time, and we've learned a lot from you.
Thank you.
Thank
you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you so much.
God bless
we wish
you.
all the best.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
have some of your children here with us. Our regional coordinator for Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda is from Kenya. That's Mr. Patrick Memo. our Vice President and Director of Logistics and Operation, Mr. Ahmed Swale, is also from Mombasa, Kenya. And so we have your children among us, and we are also planning to visit, and so that we can gain this word of wisdom from you. We really, really appreciate your time, and we pray God
yes, please. You are welcome to
your life for us. And
it's great.
We'll learn more from you. Thank you so much, sir. So Adeke, I know we are taking questions. I know there was an outstanding question for Mrs. Monica. I think we can take that in the interest of time, because Prof also has another engagement. After that question, we can take vote of thanks from the Director of Finance.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. President, and it was an honor to have you, Professor Theolo Lumumba, in our midst. The question for Council Monica is that Zambia is the 116th least corrupt nation out of the 180 countries. That is a statistics according to the corruption of 2022. Do you think that the government of Zambia is doing enough to fight the corruption?
Thank you, Adeke. I had started answering the question, and just to repeat what I stated earlier, to say it's a pity the corruption index parameter states that, but practically we have seen some changes within the country, and with the new Dawn government, we are seeing a lot of efforts being put into the fight against corruption. We are seeing the arrests of ministers who are actually holding power. We are also seeing a lot of non-conviction based asset applications being made and also being won by the state, all in an effort to make sure that we fight corruption. So with a number of arrests that have happened in the recent months and past, after that statistic that has been given, we hope to see a change and also an improvement with regard to where we are being placed in the corruption index parameter. But there are some efforts, and there's also goodwill in the fight against corruption and also financial crimes generally. Thank you so much for the question, and just to also say thank you to Professor Lumumba.
All right, thank you so much, Madam Monica, for your time and for answering those questions. I know we have a couple of questions. Okay, Adeke is back. Please, in the interest of time, we may not be able to take more questions because our guests and all the invited guests also have other engagements, and so we need to allow them. So at this point, may I invite our Director of Finance and Mobilization, Dr. Mrs. Folukeme Ridare. She has been staying online since, and she resides in Australia. And if you check the time now, it's very late in Australia, but she has been with us. So Doctor, please, on behalf of FIS, kindly give vote of thanks to all the invited guests and all the participants and everyone.
Evening, everyone. Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. There, but good morning here.
It's
Sorry.
morning in West Africa, it's evening in Australia.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to have been privileged to participate in the African Youth Summit. This year's African Youth Summit has been so wonderful, very inciting, intellectually uplifting, because we've listened to well-researched presentation from our speakers. We thank everyone that has joined us today. In a special, we want to thank our guest speaker, Mr. Mustafa Kata. We want to thank our speaker, Mrs. Abiewa Stephanie Usoriabe, for moving mountains to be able to make her presentation despite her busy schedule. We want to thank Mr. Ogwal Samuel. We thank our council, Mrs. Monica Chipanta Mwasa from Zambia. Thank you so much for your powerful presentation. We thank our Leonard Silk, Prof. Abiodun Amudakanike. We are very grateful, sir, for your presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. Thank you, sir. We are very grateful to our erudite speaker, one of the great Africans that inspires us all, Professor PLO Lumumba, that I think he's no longer online with us. But we're so grateful that he was able to join in to inspire us more, as he does regularly. We're so grateful. We're very grateful to all the organizers, all the directors, of vice presidents, our president. We're grateful to all the participants and all those who have joined in this Africa Youth Summit. We're very grateful for all the points that have been raised and all the questions that have been asked and all the answers that have been provided. And some of the key points that I would encourage us to keep in mind is Africa is rich in human and natural resources. Africa has what it takes to grow and develop. Although we have challenges such as political instability, corruption, and external influences that sometimes thwart our effort to develop, we have this zeal that is in all of us. We have this desire to continue to grow and address all the problems, all the challenges that we have as a continent. And that is something very powerful that no one can take away from us. So I would like to encourage us all to keep up with you, and hopefully we'll meet again this time next year to celebrate another Africa Youth Summit, where we will be able to discuss about the progress we are making in Africa. It's not just the challenges that we are focused on, but we're also focused on the positive developments that we're making. And we thank you all for your contribution. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Director of Finance. At this point, let me invite, since our Vice President is not around, let me invite the Regional Coordinator for Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Mr. Patrick Mamo, to declare closed the 4th edition of the FIS African Youth Summit 2023, so that next year we'll meet again. And for the participating universities in the ongoing IHL Moot competition, it's not the Moot competition that is going to be closed to, it's the Peace Summit. So Moot competition continues tomorrow. So Mr. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for this honor. My name is Patrick Mwamamomo, the Regional Coordinator for Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And of course, it has been a privilege to have this Peace Summit this year. And indeed, as our Director of Finance had articulated earlier before, we are very much grateful to all the speakers that we had the privilege to get a lot of wisdom, a lot of insights from them. And of course, with also, the special appearance of PLO Lumumba, it is always an honor to hear from such a great man. So we are very much grateful. Thank you to all our viewers. And we hope that when we invite you again, we'll be able to turn up again. And of course, as our president said, the IHL Moot continues tomorrow. And of course, we wish all the teams the very best. And on that basis, I hereby declare the Peace Summit was, for this year officially closed. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you very much, Country Coordinator, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Kenya. For our viewers, in case of any other information that you'd like to know about Firdaus Integrated Services Limited, you can visit the social media platforms on Facebook and YouTube. We're at Firdaus Integrated Services. On Twitter, we're at Firdaus Integra1. On Instagram, we're at Firdaus_Integra1. On LinkedIn, we're at Firdaus Integrated Services Limited. And our official website is www.firdausintegratedservices.com. It was a lovely time having you all. Have a blessed